intention for those who can't make it today to put it up onto YouTube through and also publicised on our website after the event. Great to see so many people here today. Apologies that we can't do this face to face. We were actually having a conversation earlier about the fact that we spent some really valuable time before previous AGMs mingling with those who could attend, asking for their views, various other things. So hopefully you'll find the experience still as interesting and useful. We don't actually expect there to be any fire drills, and if you aren't either, then they certainly shouldn't happen. But if you do hear a fire alarm, then I would suggest you go outside by the nearest entrance. Toilets are in a variety of places. In my house, they're under the stairs. So I think that's the general administration dealt with. We've got an action-packed agenda. David, our General Secretary, will take us through a couple of items of housekeeping, and then I will check out actions from the minutes from last year and review how things have gone in 1920. It's been a pretty interesting year in all aspects. And I'll also touch on things to come in 2021. But Tom, our Chief Officer, will probably go into far more detail around the coming year. Luke will then present our accounts, Luke, our Treasurer, and introduce the voting elements of the meeting. You'll all have a chance to vote. That's about our accountants and also new trustees and officers. During the meeting, you're absolutely welcome to use the question and answer function on Zoom, and you should see that easily on your screen. Please feel free to ask any questions as we go through things. We'll try and respond to all of those live as you ask those. However, there will be a chance at the end of the meeting to have a far more open forum where people can put their hands up, signify that they've got a question to ask, and we may be able to verbally connect you to the panel and we can deal with questions there and then. We'll try and take the strain out of ensuring that the whole event runs as smoothly as possible, and making sure that there'll be time for a presentation all the way through. So my task today is making sure we try and keep to time. The agenda says that we should finish about 12:30, and I'll try and make sure we do. My other task is to make sure that you have an engaging and interesting event. So welcome. Over to you, David.
Sorry, I was muted centrally, didn't realise I had to unmute me. Good morning, and actually Simon's given you most of the information that I have to give you about when I wave my arms around directing you to the fire escapes and toilets. But just running through one or two other points, you should have received an email yesterday from Lucy Davis with an agenda, which has also got the list of nominees for officers and trustees, last year's minutes, a copy of the annual report that Simon will be talking to, a copy of the Treasurer's report that Luke will be talking to, and also a page with details of the new trustees and officers who've joined us during the year and you'll be voting for the first time. When it comes to voting, a pop-up form will appear on the screen where you signify yes, no, or abstain, and then that will be counted and administered by Dan. As Simon has said about questions and answers at the bottom of the screen, could I suggest that if you type a question, that if you're aware of the person who should be answering it, or a heading of the subject, say finance or conservation, so that we can point the question it makes it easier to point the question in the right direction. Other than that, you've been muted centrally, and we hope to be able to unmute you when we get to the open forum at the end of the day. That's all the housekeeping I have to give. And so I've received apologies from Hayden Bailey, Dr. Tony and Mrs. Anne Noakes, and Maura Buckland. And with that, it's over to you, Simon. Simon, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
No,
thank you very much, David. Just if we move on the slides and we go to the first slide, that's great. Thanks very much, Dan. This is probably the only time I did any work this year. This was a picture of myself attending the working party, the Rights of Way working party at Lucknow earlier in the year, when we were able to work together as groups of 6. And this is putting in one of the gates and also fixing some of the signs. So part of the work that all of our volunteers and others get involved in. Last year at the AGM, we talked about a number of things. There weren't any items outstanding from that meeting, but we did talk about the year to come. Since then, I would say that we've had a stronger than ever partnership with the Chiltern Conservation Board. I'm very pleased to talk about that. We've expanded and refurbished the White Hill Centre, our HQ and offices for where our staff are based. Tom will talk a bit more about the various campaigns that we've launched in the year, and those are going well. And will be aspects of the future. Obviously HS2 is still around. We've been campaigning to with others to both to prevent it, but also to where we can't, to mitigate that over the year. And there've been a number of actions and letters that we've written into Parliament to address some of that. I think we've had a pretty successful year. We'll talk about some new trustees. Sad to see a few existing trustees leave, but the future, I think, in terms of the society, looks very healthy. We've talked about earlier about presenting online. One of the things that we've just been discussing is that we'd like to really interact with our members far more often. We are a membership led society, and we want your views. We need to understand what you are thinking, and we'd like to present where we've got to on a far more regular occasion. So this may not be the first and last online presentation that we all do. Looking through some of the minutes from past meetings back in 1966, which was not only a good year for the England football team, but also was a good year for the Chiltern Society, where we at least had £90 in the bank. Moving on, another 55 years further into the future, today we have a turnover of nearly £500,000 and a widening membership, and also support infrastructure. And we are still creating that brighter future for the Chilterns that we planned all those years ago. The Bluebell Guild was something that Michael, our president, thought up some years ago, which was the fact that actually, because we're a charity, there are good reasons for people leaving money to support the Chilterns in their will, and pass on their legacies to the Children's Society. If you are interested in doing so and you've not participated in that guild so far, please check out our website. It is a fantastic way of turning your money into supporting the Chilterns going forward. We did some calculation recently. Every £1 that our members put into the society turns into about £5 or £6 worth of volunteer effort across the piece, and I think that's something to really celebrate. Can we move on to the next slide, please? This is a fantastic picture of all the chalk streams in the country, and you will see that the majority of those actually are in the Chiltern area. It's a very special place. The Chalk Rivers Action Group, CRAG, has gone from strength to strength. Doug is Doug Kennedy. What I wanted to do was really talk about the power of individuals. A long time ago, somebody called Julia Middleton formed a charity called Common Purpose. I think she founded it in 1989. I went to a talk in the 90s where there was a big debate about who holds the power in the country. Is it the government? Is it the big business? Is it the institutions? Is it a sort of whole range of other organisations? And actually, after a lot of debate, it was felt that who holds the power in the country are individuals. But the issue is that individuals don't have an impact because they're not working together. And actually, the feeling was that actually, if individuals do work together, they have a phenomenal impact. And an individual as such is Doug Kennedy, who has gained a sort of a band of people around him addressing issues around the chalk streams, lobbied Parliament, lobbied a whole range of MPs and the water companies, Environment Agency, etc., to end with a very, very successful conference this year where things had really moved on and there were brighter futures shown for the chalk streams in the Chilterns and beyond. So that is the power of one individual making a difference. In fact, it's interesting to reflect on our name, the Chiltern Society, and you might think that society is quite an old name, but actually in my book, a society is really a community with a common purpose. And this is a community of individuals which we all are coming together with a common purpose around campaigning, conserving, promoting the Chilterns across the piece. Many of our members will have seen our very comprehensive response to the Glover Review. Very, very supportive of National Park for the Chilterns. There are obviously some challenges with that, but potentially we are supportive of that work and changing the Chilterns into a national landscape and the benefits that accrue from that side of things. I've talked about HS2 already. The Oxfordshire-Cambridge ARC we've campaigned against and we've made many reparations around. Heathrow expansion, Luton expansion, all things that we're maintaining our campaigning stance on and we know our members feel keenly about. I've talked about new trustees. We've got some fantastic new trustees. Luke Jeffries, who you will hear later, our new treasurer, Catherine Moncrief, Lisbeth Sherlock, Dan Turner, who is working the all-important infrastructure and IT behind this presentation today, and Harriet Bennett, all of which have participated fully during the year as part of their new role as a trustee for the Chiltern Society. And we're also in the process of gaining some more that we'll talk about over the next few weeks and months. If we can move on to the next slide. I won't say too much about 2021. We've consolidated things in 1920. I think we've got a full board of trustees. We've got good infrastructure in place. We've moved to a new accounting system. We've put in a customer relationship management database, which helps us to communicate to members and also to other stakeholder groups. We've revamped, as we've said, the offices. So we've got ourselves and the society into a good place, I think, for the future. If we can move on to the next slide. I just was going to pick out one story from each of the seasons of the year. These are our magazines over the last year. Back in our winter edition, we talked about the cycle paths that we maintain and promote through our cycling group and other aspects in the Chilterns. We estimated, as we were waiting for the AGM to start, there are some 500 miles of cycle paths around the Chilterns. That doesn't include the Chiltern Cycleway, which is mainly roads and that's another 170 miles of pathway. Our spring edition had a fantastic presentation from Alan Kell around our living village. That was the history of Sear Green and Jordan's. Very much part of our Heritage Festival. I was very proud to present that as part of our, yes, cut down Heritage Festival, but still a successful event this year. In autumn, I talked about the Doug Kennedy Inspired Chalk Streams Conference. That saw movement by many of the parties involved and was really, I think, symptomatic of the campaigning stance that this society has had over the last few years. And lastly, the autumn edition, which concentrated on a number of things, especially including small businesses with big hearts. This was around promoting all the businesses that are around the Chilterns that we want to promote and support, especially in these times of increased challenge and uncertainty going forward over the future. So we'd like to think that even though we've had a pretty challenging year for any society or any charity, we've actually ended up coming out very positive and really looking forward to things in the future. Tom, I'm now going to hand over to you, and you can tell us a bit more about that future.
Simon, can you do me a favour? Can you do last year's minutes? We missed that on the agenda.
There were no actions. There were no actions from last year's minutes, and I've covered any of the items that we featured in those minutes as part of my presentation. Tom.
Brilliant. Cheers. Thanks. Sorry, Simon. All right. Good morning, everybody. It's a bit strange being here virtually meeting everybody. 12 months ago, or just over 12 months ago, I was just sort of starting, and at my last AGM, I felt a bit like a rabbit in the headlights. I just got my head around our business plan and what we were actually doing. And AGMs are always, if somebody's sitting in my chair, are always quite an interesting time of year because it gives you a really good chance to take stock of the year and where you are to sort of go forward. So after last year's AGM, apart from the stuff we talked about, CRAG and whatever, I sort of took stock of 6 things that we needed to really do. Dan, if you could move on to my next slide, that'd be great. And those 6 things were basically about our systems, which Simon's touched on. When I actually started, we were looking for new offices. We were running out of space, and our offices were looking a bit tired. We were looking to focus on our membership. We were looking to actively fundraise more, and we got our business plan sorted by last AGM again, and the present trustees and myself and staff team had taken that as theirs. We sort of identified we've got over 40 groups, volunteer groups, which for an organisation our size is awesome, but actually communicating with those groups and everybody else is quite difficult, and we needed to improve our communications. And we were talking about empowering volunteers to do even more work, which again, Simon and individuals to do more work. And I sort of looked at that list, and I think I've given myself 5 out of 6. And in this unusual year, I'm really chuffed with that. And I think I'm probably a bit harsh on the 6th one, which is I think we'd like to empower volunteers a little bit more. But the amount of work, say, that Craig's done over the last 12 months, and Simon touched on that Doug's done over the last 12 months, where we've actually taken the whole chalk streams debate away from just being a local debate, away from loads of different groups, and we've got everybody else talking with us, and we've got that focus right the way up to ministerial level at government. We've got it focused across all the different groups across the Chilterns, talking to each other. We're like a federation of groups, and the Chalk Streams project, it looks like it's going to get more funding than it's had for a long time. And there's bills going through Parliament, which we're obviously supporting to stop the sewage going through. So our impacts of one volunteer and a lot of other people backing him up as well have had an amazing impact. So I really feel like we have actually probably should pat ourselves on the back and give ourselves 6 out of 6. If you could move on, please, Dan. But just to cover those little bits on, behind anything we achieve, it's always people driven. And as Simon said, this is a society, it's a community of people. And it's really nice because I feel it is like one team of us working here together. And it's really, I look forward to going into the offices when I'm allowed to go into the offices, particularly now they're all sparkling and looking fantastic, and we created more space for people to work in, and now we're not allowed to go and work in them very often, but at least actually having done them, we can go into the office a little bit because we can now socially distance, which I think if we'd have had the offices as they were 12 months ago, we wouldn't have even been able to do that. So until this week, even we've been having a few meetings in the office with 2 or 3 people. But I'd like to sort of highlight a few people. I've on purposely put the magazine up on this slide. I think it is still one of our jewels in our crown. Before I was working here, my magazine was something I looked forward to. What amazed me about a magazine here is that any other charity, there would be staff employed to produce that magazine, and it would take up loads and loads of time. But Richard and the team that volunteered to run that magazine just produced something that's fantastic. And in my role, I meet a lot of publishers of different things, and I had the good fortune to meet Tim Davey about a week ago, who's the Director General of the BBC, did head up the commercial arm of the BBC, publishing loads and loads of magazines. And he said that we should be really proud of that magazine and was really pleased and look forward to receiving his copy. So thank you, Richard. That's not the only thing we publish each year. And I think this year we've had our 25 More Great Walks books comes out, which sort of backs up all the walks we do. And Andrew, I sort of look at that, but Louis have created that book. And anybody who wants a Christmas present, get online, go and buy that book. It's fantastic. I didn't use our books before I arrived here, but now I just think they're fantastic. I go and I pick it up and it inspires me to go and do a different walk or just approach a walk in a different way. And those sort of books and that sort of walk in our magazine have really helped people in this lockdown get out and about. And that team around that Rights Away group have done an amazing job on having all those sort of socially distanced walks out there, working with all our organisations. Our volunteers have worked really closely with the Chiltern Conservation Board on that and getting people out to walk out and about. So it's absolutely fab. Just a few of our staff I'd just like to mention in particular, Tracy and Helen, and who hopefully quite a few of you do know, because they're the people that send out the reminders to payers, your membership fees. They make sure you get the magazine, but they've worked really hard this year on doing that CRM system that Simon mentioned. And I think of now starting to get a few less sleepless nights. Now it's all implemented, but our membership system is now completely integrated into everything else. And our accounts team with Heather, who's our bookkeeper, along with some of our trustees that help implement a whole new account structure, are all linked in, and we're much more streamlined. And the nice thing about that is we've saved some money, so our costs have come down this year, and that puts us in a good place going forward. I can't not mention all the work we do on Rights of Way and our sites and our conservation work, and all the volunteers that work around that. I'm not even going to start to thank them, but we're in a really good place to go forward. I think we need to highlight Ash Dieback as something that we are concerned about going forward. But Gavin and Fiona have worked really hard this time on trying to keep volunteers out there. They were well ahead of the curve on getting proper safeguarding processes going out there. And for a small organisation, we were really, really on the front foot. They've done an awesome job this year. And it's really keen to see the volunteers are really keen to go out there and been sensible and been fantastic. But again, our Rights Away stuff, I think, is a really undersung thing. Everybody knows that's what we're for, and we do so much great work on it. And it looks like the Misbourne Greenway that we were starting to talk about last year, we'll start work on that in the early part of the new year with Sustrans. The stretch from Waddesdon through Buckinghamshire, our friends at Buckinghamshire County Council are working hard on that. And then with Sustrans, we're working hard to do the first part going through the Chilterns, from Wendover to Great Missington, making sure the landowners are all happy and making sure we do the right stuff. So, and right at the other end of that, we've the Combe Valley Park are talking to us about the Misbourne Greenway going into there. So I've got a picture in 5 or 10 years, we'll be adding to our cycleways in the Chilterns like we've never done before. With that, it's fantastic. I think if I move on, our planning stuff is just gone from strength to strength this year. I think Colin, who's our planning lead, head of planning, who's only with us 1 or 2 days a week, and Michael Jepson, who chairs our planning group, and the whole team. Again, too many people to mention, but I know we've had volunteers do. Mike Chadwick put together an amazing transport sustainability strategy this year. We've responded to more plans than ever, and I'm really chuffed to see that group is now going forward to a new approach to planning. And I'm hoping over the next 12 months, we can actually really start to make a real dent in how we look at planning. And I hope there's some new ideas on that. We can't continue to play by the rules. We might have lost the battle on HS2. Our HS2 campaigners are doing a great job on mitigating things, but it's just appalling that project's gone. And if we keep playing by the same rules as we played with, projects like that will continue. I won't go about Crag and Chiltern Chalk Streams project much more. Simon's talked about that a little bit, but what Doug's done with that is awesome. But it has meant the Chiltern Chalk Streams project, I think, has had more focus. And on the ground, Alan Beachy and the Chiltern Chalk Stream project, hopefully we'll be able to do more work going forward. I think it's a really great project. It's something we should be really, really proud of in the Chilterns, and I think we all are. This year's been very strange. So Lucy, who normally does our events, has been managing our online content and doing loads more. Obviously, we've had much more interaction with people online. And I think we've become much more streamlined on that and getting more done on that. We will be putting a call out for help with that work going forward, and hopefully have more volunteers working with that with us, because we have so much to say, and I don't think we're telling people enough about what we're doing. We are fundraising stuff. We've got a new fundraiser starting in a few weeks' time, which we're all very excited about. We've got a great plan for fundraising going over next year. I'm really hoping we can give you some really good news on actually closing our structural deficit that we've had for many years. I do say structural deficit because our balance sheet's looking healthy because of legacies. So whatever, but I think I've just sort of given you an idea of all the sort of the work the staff team and the volunteers and the trustees doing, and it's really fantastic to see so much work happening, and I wish we could probably tell you more about what we're doing in a way, but I think I'll probably draw a bit of a close to there. If you can move on for me, Dan. So really, I think the only thing I'd like to flag out, our business plan really now is under 4 stories, and you'll see these, they're evolving. I won't go into much detail with them, but hopefully quite a few of you are joining our Cleaner Greener conference this afternoon. It's not just about reducing your carbon. I'm really hoping that will come out and have an inspiring take on it, like Crag did, and that we focus on what we can do on climate change and biodiversity loss across the Chilterns, because whatever we say, we are losing the battle on biodiversity, and we need to do something amazingly different than we've done before. So please do join us then. Just a quick note, if anybody does want to see this AGM afterwards or the conference and they can't make it, Dan has set up a new YouTube channel and it'll all go live then. If you don't think you hear enough about us, our Facebook page is probably the best place to catch up with us, and that's the one that Lucy focuses on. But I think it leaves me just to say I'm actually really looking forward to next year. Thank you very much. If you can't get to our shop, go into the shop and send e-cards. We partnered with our friends at don'tsendmeacard.com this time. So maybe a bit less carbon. Don't send a card, send a thank you and give us a donation. But thank you very much, folks. It's a real privilege to have this role, and it's a really lovely place to be living and working. And I think I'll hand over to a more formal part of the process and hand over to Luke, who will tell you about our financial position.
Okay, thanks Tom, thanks Simon. Okay, good morning all. For those that are wondering, the picture behind me is Spade Oak in Bourne End, which I visited recently. I don't live there, but I visited recently and thought was particularly lovely. So going to talk some numbers. These are draft numbers, I should point out, and are subject to audit. I'm going to start speaking to our auditors or examiners, I think they're called, next week. So I'll run through, if I may, what I see as some highlights, and then make some general points as being fairly new, some general points that occurred to me that might be of interest to you. And I will try and keep it mercifully short. Okay, so income, if we could have that up, Dan. Currently we've got a Google search. Okay, so just the highlights from this, you'll see that our income is dominated by subscriptions and legacies. So our subscriptions and donations are steady year on year, and that reflects our steady membership. Now, the Chiltern Society would like its membership to be growing and be larger, but actually maybe we can be thankful in some ways that actually it's steady, and therefore our income is steady. Legacies, as Simon touched on, they are, it strikes me when first looking at the numbers at Chiltern Society, how important legacies are to the Chiltern Society. All members should be very grateful to those who have previously given, and indeed those who already have Chiltern Society in their will, which obviously is tax efficient way of giving. But if you come back to these numbers, they're the two things that dominate our income, and our income has held up pretty well. It's down slightly because legacies were slightly lower, but nevertheless legacies were quite strong. For example, our last 3-year average legacies were 130,000. So you can see contextually that actually legacies, which can be quite lumpy, have actually held up pretty well. So that's a high level look at our income. Expenditure, if we could go to that slide, Dan. So our expenditure, you'll see, has gone up by 80-odd thousand, and that's deliberate. When one looks at the plan that Tom has mentioned, it was always intended that expenditure would be increased, and that's predominantly staff costs. But of course, that allows a greater difference to be made to the children's. So that's investment that is, or an expenditure that is being willingly made. But it does overall leave us with a net deficit in funds for the year of 70-odd thousand, which is slightly worse than last year. So that's a combination of our income being slightly lower, our expenditure being slightly higher. Just in passing, you'll see that our investments have decreased in value, and that is probably no surprise to people when one looks at what's been happening to particularly UK investments, where that's where our funds are focused. Okay, so if we then look at the balance sheet, Dan, I will. That has changed obviously by the net movement in funds of 70-odd thousand, but nevertheless still around about 1 million. So I'll come back to that as the general points, so which I would generally make these points, I think. So COVID, I think it's a good conversation to have and a good question to ask, which is, well, given when one looks around at charities at the moment and how they're being many are being severely impacted by COVID, actually how worried should we be in the Chiltern Society? So I think if we go back and you think about those numbers we've just been through, well, actually our income will be impacted because it isn't just about legacies, it isn't just about subscriptions. Actually, a number of events take place throughout the year normally which aren't happening. So our income is going to be down, but actually not to a huge degree. Our expenditure, actually that will be down as well, because you expend as you have events and the likes, but that won't be enough to actually make up for the impact of COVID. So, because we've got some fixed costs like staff costs. So overall, I think we can expect our numbers to be down. We can expect another loss next year. But I think we don't need to panic. It's actually quite manageable. And that is, at that point, takes us back to our balance sheet. So our balance sheet is quite strong. And so actually, we can manage to have another year of losses, which I don't anticipate being vastly different to last year. So being manageable. I think there'll be a bigger loss, by the way, but manageable nevertheless. I think the other point that I'd make, actually, when one looks at all of these numbers, is the volunteer and member impact. So a lot of charities actually don't have volunteers, like the Chiltern Society, and actually many actually don't have members. So actually they just live day to day off donations or let's say raising money from London Marathon and the likes. But the difference that makes to the Chiltern Society in its numbers are when one looks at its expenditure, actually the real value that the Chiltern Society is providing has a multiplier effect on that number. So simple example, if I go and buy a pair of shears and they cost £20, but then I go and spend all day clearing a path, how much value have I added? Well, I've probably added, let's say £250 if you want to put a number on it, but actually I'll spend 25. So actually the Chiltern Society, via its all important members and volunteers who are the big differentiator, actually multiply into these numbers. So the real value that Chiltern Society is adding is vastly greater than these numbers, which I think is an important thing for us to all remember. Okay, so there's a quick spin through they're quite high level numbers, I accept, but that's how the accounts are presented, which I've stuck with. So a quick run through those and some general points that I thought might be useful for people to hear. And that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions later on or via the Q&A in Zoom.
Okay, thanks, Luke. Can people hear me? So hopefully you can all hear me. Just before we get into the voting section of the meeting, I just wanted to say I mentioned a number of trustees stepping down. I just wanted to really go through them. I hope this doesn't embarrass them as part of this. We've got 4 trustees who are standing down, really. Mary Molesworth, who has been a trustee for 12 years. And Marion has played a really key part as part of our planning committee and the planning advice around things. I first met Marion as part of the Building Design Awards presentation about a year ago, and they're really impressed by the input that Marion and others had put into both the design awards and also into the planning side of things. Secondly, Councillor Patricia Bursley, Buckinghamshire councillor. She's been a trustee for 7 years, a key contact with Buckinghamshire Council. We've got an event this afternoon where we've got another councillor, Councillor Steve Broadbent, speaking. We've had a very good relationship with Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire councils, but Patricia has been extremely supportive and helpful over that 7-year period. Les Moscow. Les, I know you're here today. You're not only stepping down as a trustee, but you also stepped down as the North Chilterns Path Maintenance Volunteers Coordinator and an active member of the cycling group. I mean, you've thrown yourself into all aspects really of the Chiltern Society over those 6 years. You'll be very sadly missed. I know certainly Les has been one of the most supportive and enthusiastic trustees over certainly the period that I've been associated with the Chiltern Society as well. And lastly, Peter Duxbury, who stood down in the year. He was only a trustee for 3 years, but actually Peter's impact on the society and the society's thinking was immense. I'd like to think that I have a challenging role as a chair. I have a board of trustees, all with individual thoughts about how we should take things forward. And Peter was one of the best at putting forward some great and innovative ideas around a whole range of things that we've adopted over the period. And so I'm extremely grateful for Peter and his work as part of the Trust Board. Two other people I just wanted to mention, along with Les, who are standing down as some of our path maintenance volunteer coordinators, and that is both Howard Dell, who has done this for some time in the South Chilterns, and also Richard Boas, part of the Central Path Maintenance Volunteers Group. Thank you very much to both Howard and Richard for all the work you've done. It's nice to see some other people come forward, but really grateful for those being involved for so long. Right, okay, so we now come to the voting part of the agenda, really. The first item that we need to vote on is one, our reappointment of or appointment of our reporting accountants, and I'm very grateful to Wilkins Kennedy and especially Stephen Grant from that organisation for the support that you've provided us over the last year. And I have a proposal from David Abbas and seconded by Dan Turner that Wilkins Kennedy again will be our reporting accountants next year. So Dan, can you put the voting slip up onto people's screens? Oh, sorry, no, before we do that, I will come to, Michael, who will also mention around the election of officers and trustees, and then we will have the vote. So over to you, Michael. Apologies.
Michael, can you unmute yourself, please?
Now,
Michael, we're all
okay. Is that okay? Can people hear me now?
We can. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you very much. Okay, well, I'm delighted to conduct this election of the officers and trustees as listed on the agenda. And just remind everybody that because of the restraints of the Zoom meeting, I'm going to ask you to embrace all the appointments that I mentioned in one vote at the end. So I suppose if you have any objections to any one of the proposals, you'll have to vote against the motion altogether or abstain. But I hope that this election will not prove as acrimonious as some of the others, which you may have possibly have noticed on television recently. Now, firstly, I changed the order from that on the agenda slightly because I feel that we should first elect Simon Carey as our chairman. He is should be our number one on the list, and I'm sure we will all feel he's doing a sterling job, and so we're pleased to have the opportunity of electing him today. David Abbas as General Secretary, he's done a sterling job too over many years, and David Harris also will be electing as Vice Chairman. And these three names I think are well known to most of us, and they will give this vital continuity to the operations of our society over the coming years. Then we have a wonderful selection of new people coming on board. And firstly, we've got Dan Turner, who's being proposed as trustee and vice chairman. He's already chairman, of course, of our Rivers and Wetlands Group, and leading this vital campaign for our chalk streams. And I see from his profile, he is good at getting stuff done. Well, that's just the sort of guy we need, isn't he? Luke Jeffries is being proposed as treasurer, and I'm pleased to see from his profile, he's keen to become involved more widely in the Chiltern Society's activities over the coming years. Harriet Bennett being proposed as trustee, and her profile tells us that her focus is on local nature conservation projects, and that she also works for the Chiltern's Conservation Board and has a very strong family connection with the Chiltern Society through her late father. Then we've got Catherine Moncrief being proposed as trustee, and her profile explains that her professional life is centered around water and is keen to help protect our precious chalk streams, and also to avoid intense developments and ensure that Chilterns becomes a model for sustainable living, working and wildlife. Great ambition, Catherine. I'm pleased that we have you on board. And then Elizabeth Sherlock being proposed as trustee, and she's been a member, I see, of the Chiltern Society for many years and has a love for the Chilterns. And she works full-time at Cisco, who, as you probably know, are a leading international digital technology company, and has research, marketing and communication skills, which I'm sure will be of great value to the Chiltern Society. Now, all these appointments have got proposers and seconders, and so now I must ask you to vote for all the 8 proposed candidates by tapping on to the format which we have on our screen now. Yes for acceptance, no for non-acceptance, and abstaining if you know no better. Thank you very much. Please vote now.
Thank you, Michael. So we'll give people about 20 seconds or so to quickly click on the selection of their choice, and then we'll bring up the results on screen.
Oh, I thought we were going to do the results on Wednesday of next week, Simon. That's a joke.
Well, as those who are here will realise, we have rehearsed quite a bit of this, but there are still elements of this that are unrehearsed. So, Dan, I was taken aback there, but yeah, we will let people know about that today.
So
I trust that
we have
be edited.
Yep. We have 89% of people have voted, Mr. Chair. So when you are happy with that percentage of people that have voted, I'll end the poll and share the results.
I think that sounds like a good number. Let's have a look at the let's end the polling and let's see the results, please, Dan.
Oh, there's one abstain.
We've got a few abstainers. Very interesting, but certainly Wilkins Kennedy are all in, and I'm grateful for a majority response regarding the trustees and those proposed that Michael's just gone through. So thank you very much for that. Thanks, Dan. I'm going to close that. And Michael, I think you would like to say a few words. Is that right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. I'm always delighted on these occasions to have the opportunity of saying a few words of appreciation, primarily because the society is run so much by our volunteers, and this has to be an opportunity to thank those for all the achievements that we benefit from in the Chiltern Society and in the Chilterns generally. But well, what a year it's been. This meeting had to be delayed. It's squashed between the celebrations of one of our first terrorist scares in 1605 by Guy Fawkes and the sacking of the President of the USA, perhaps after only one term. So we're squeezed in between two incredible events, but I think this is perhaps the most enjoyable. Before I say any more, I must just mention the death of one of our very distinguished members yesterday morning, which I'm sure you've probably all noted from television, Geoffrey Palmer. He was a wonderful British actor and had so many credits to his name, and of course was a strong supporter of the Chiltern Society, and he freely provided his voiceover for our very important video, which went to all the MPs in the House of Commons to emphasize the dreadful impact that HS2 was going to impact on the Chilterns. And sadly, of course, we weren't successful in that event, but certainly we were privileged to have the benefit of Geoffrey's input on that, which made it a very professional sounding video. Now, moving from the past to the future, I'm very encouraged to see the great team, the staff and volunteers and officers and trustees that have been assembled by Simon and others for election today. This year has been obviously very disappointing in the latter 9 months or so, that so many of our activities have had to be curtailed, postponed, and it's not surprising our membership hasn't grown in that period. I think we're at about 6,700 at the moment, and it's amazing, really. It always amazes me that we retain our members for such a good length of time. So once people become involved with the Chiltern Society, they do stick with us. And I reckon that our membership, average membership span is about 25 years, which really is astonishing for a charity of our nature. But of course, that means that we lose about 4% every year. And so we have about 270 members loss each year. So to stand still, we have to recruit that sort of numbers, and to expand, we need obviously even more. And it's very important, I believe, that we do remain primarily a volunteer organization, and a volunteer organization with the benefit of some professional guidance and organizational skills. I think we hopefully will be able to maintain and expand our membership over the coming years. And I see that expansion really is evolving. I always feel if we're meeting the needs and ambitions of the community in the Chilterns, then that should be reflected in our membership growth. So I look forward to some success of involving more of the community in our activities and joining our wonderful breadth of volunteers that we benefit from. It's 18 years now since we launched the Bluebell Guild with the aim of encouraging members to remember the Chiltern Society in their wills. And the response has been very encouraging over that period, and in particular in more recent years. And I think that, as you will see from the annual report that Luke has presented, it does now have a very significant impact on our finances. And I hope that others will be encouraged to sign up for that gift that the Society so desperately needs if the improvements in our Chilterns is going to be maintained and improved. it's obviously a volatile, and it's difficult to predict exactly how much any one year will provide, but it does give us that stability of a good balance sheet that we so desperately need to move forward with our ambitions in confidence. Now, so with the good leadership and the wonderful band of volunteers, hopefully, as I say, which will expand over future years, I'm sure that we have adequate financial backing, and I'm sure that we can face the very challenging future with confidence. So I'd like to thank all the members of the Chiltern Society, especially the volunteers, and let us all be a breath of fresh air for the benefit of our environment in the Chilterns.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
One
Michael.
support. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now, I've been looking at where we are in terms of timing, and we are well ahead of ourselves, which is either that we've been shown far more brevity than we thought we might, or that actually our timings are completely wrong. So we are well ahead of ourselves in terms of the timing for the meeting. We're just about to come to open forum. There has been some there was feedback from a number of people regarding the voting of trustees and officers, and we have used this method in the past where we have done it en bloc. I think it may be that in future, I think we need to review this, and I make a commitment to the members that where possible, we'll have a voting mechanism next year where individual people can be voted for separately, albeit that whether we do it online or whether we do it offline. So that makes it far more easier to understand who's been voted for and who hasn't. And I appreciate that in this case, you've had to do it en bloc. Right, there has been some questions around HS2. Rosemary, you've asked a question around HS2. I don't know, Tom, did you want to answer that the question that Rosemary's posed on the question and answer, please?
Yeah, yeah, HS2. I think John Gladwin and the team of volunteers around that have responded to virtually everything that's come up on HS2. I was trying to find the actual response. I haven't been able to find it on that, but yeah, they've been lobbying hard on that. It's just, yeah, HS2 is unbelievable. I think the other thing that's happening at the moment that John has been writing to MPs about and leading on with that and somebody else is what's happening in James Hill Wood as well. So yeah, HS2 is very much stuff we're pushing on around the background, and John Gladwin's done a great job on that, and Jim Conboy as well.
There's been some recent challenges around some wood and some bats, hasn't there?
Yeah, that's the Jones Hill Wood stuff. Yeah, so that's the bit, and yeah, so John again, and Jim Conboy in particular have been working with Kath Daly and Elaine at Chiltern Conservation Board to make sure we're both screaming at ministers, MPs, that this is unacceptable, at Natural England that it's totally unacceptable. How much we're being listened to, or anybody's being listened to, I don't know. HS2 just seems to be one of those things that is being steamrolled through. But luckily, like I said, there's about 6 or 7 volunteers constantly on the case with it and doing an absolutely awesome job.
I see some, Peter, you've asked about the relationship with Chiltern Conservation Board. I would like to answer that first, but I think I'll also go to Dan as well. Ever since I've come on board, really, as chair and vice chair a couple of years ago, I had a fantastic relationship with both Sue Holden and who was the outgoing chief exec, and also with Elaine King. In fact, Elaine and I had a coffee just the other day to talk about how the two organisations could work closer together. we deemed that that we want to have that on a far more regular basis. And I know Tom has got very good relationships in with the Chiltern Conservation Board, with both Kath, who Tom's just mentioned, but also with Elaine and many of the other team working there. So clearly, I think this is a period where we are working far more closely with the board. We've also, I think, the future where Chiltern Conservation Board led some years ago, which in their successful bids into Heritage Lottery Fund and to other fund bids, will be more joint bids between the Chiltern Society and the Chiltern Conservation Board in looking at a variety of projects across the Chilterns. And we see that as a increased funding mechanism using our volunteers, but also and our expertise and knowledge, but also using the Chiltern Conservation Board network of people and their skills and expertise as well in partnership. Dan, I don't know, can I come to you, because you're our current attendee of the Chiltern Conservation Board at the moment. I wonder if you can give us some insights into that.
Yeah, definitely. So I attended my first meeting with CCB last week. A little bit apprehensive, I have to say, as the documents were about 97 pages long, the bit of light reading before the meeting. But I have to say it was a thoroughly engaging and interesting meeting. The amount of work that CCB is doing now, together with us, together with Chiltern Rangers, together with other organisations, is truly impressive, actually. They've done some good work raising funds from Network Rail that will enable some really significant projects. So I think the future is very exciting. And in some respects, what we're doing appears to overlap a bit. And I think there's a challenge there, making sure that we're not doing the same things, but that was discussed and is continually being discussed. And I think what we need to do is just leverage our two efforts rather than kind of having them overlapping. So I'm very excited about it. A great body of experience and input from local councils, absolutely fantastic. And driven by Elaine and Ian, it was a really engaging and interesting meeting. They are in some respects struggling with what's going on, and in other respects, I think they've embraced everything, all the changes that are happening now, and they're moving forward very impressively with a large number of projects ongoing. So in summary, for me, having attended the meeting, I would say there's a lot we can learn from them, actually. But let's learn some of that, work together, and make both of our efforts worth more than the sum of the parts, I think.
Thanks very much, Dan. Peter, your question about the Heritage Festival, one close to my heart. I'm really pleased. It was looking certainly earlier in the year that we'd have to cancel the whole festival. It was looking increasingly more difficult to organise many of the events, and I'm really pleased that Steve Edgar and his team have managed to put something together. Not as big as previous years, but we have a commitment there to provide a festival on a regular basis for the next few years. We see it going from strength to strength. We've got the feedback from those who attended has been absolutely brilliant. Some of the events this year we refocused to address really an online audience. So we had presentations, as I've said earlier, from Alan around the Living Village, but there were many other presentations and talks that were online, so it enabled more people to access those. And I think we've seen that with other organisations who equally have been doing their own festivals, that still many of those who have been doing the outdoor events as part of that, they've continued, albeit in smaller groups. But also much of this has gone online and benefited from perhaps greater attendance on some of these online meetings, and the attendance figures today are symptomatic of, I think, being accessible for a range of people, and an ability to ask questions where actually in a more physical and usual audience, it's been more difficult to ask those questions. So So I think just to answer your question, the Heritage Festival is here to stay. Oh, Peter, that is a fantastic question, and one really, I think, aimed at you yourself, Tom. If you can see that question from Peter.
Which one are we looking at now? Sorry.
How did the trustees consider the ethical issues with the NFU sponsoring the Cleaner, Greener Chilterns initiative?
I'm a bit confused what you mean by the ethical issues of the NFU supporting the Cleaner, Greener initiative. If you're referring to the fact that agriculture has a ramification on our environment, I couldn't agree more. But if we don't work with farmers, then we're not going to resolve that. And one of the things that I get very frustrated with is from conservation organisations is how they talk down to farmers. And if we want farming to do stuff, we need to embrace farming. Certainly, the work we're doing alongside the Conservation Board to link with farmers with farm clusters, and it's being led by the Conservation Board, is a really good way of approaching it, and it's making a big difference. Was that, I don't know, Peter, if you wanted to expand on that a bit more, if I've answered the right question.
Dan, I think you might be also wanting to say a few words. Are you able to?
Yeah, I'm able to say a few words, but I'm not sure it'd be necessarily helpful. I mean, I think there is a place for farming, as you know, it's absolutely critical. And certainly as things move forward into next year, we're going to be more and more reliant on domestic production. So I'm not sure I see it in such an ethical sense. I just think that we all need to work together to find the right balance moving forward. And perhaps that might involve some areas like the work that Harriet's been doing with local farms to encourage more biodiversity, more planting. There's got to be a better way of doing it. We don't need just wide open plains of fields, but I feel like we are moving in the right direction. So NFU is a very important part of that farming community. I know it from some of the things that I've done with NFU. So I absolutely think that it's another one of those cases where we can't say we're not going to work with absolutely everyone, and I certainly appreciate the funds that they've contributed this year as part of that.
Okay, I think it's a really good point. I mean, we spent a long time looking at our values, the values of the society, about a year or so ago when we had an away day. And one of the things that we were pitched up with was definitely collaboration is really key, because I think once you cut yourself off from other parties, then you really don't have as much influence as you need to have. So collaborating with people, I think, was seen by trustees and I think our members as the way forward to basically be inside the camp so we can influence, and working closely with people who are earning livings on the ground, who are going about their business, etc., etc. And you might argue that potentially some of those businesses may not be as ethically sound as you'd like, but the only way to influence those is actually to engage. And I completely agree with what Dan and Tom have just been saying. Are there any more questions from people? So we've got quite a few comments made around HS2, and I think if he was here, John Gladwin, who is leading on HS2 for the Society, would, I'm sure, be able to answer those in far more detail. As Thomas said, we are picking up every aspect of HS2 within the Chilterns and responding to it. We know that it's a key area that our members are interested in, but we probably won't be able to answer in detail all the questions you have for us today, but hopefully we will be able to get back to you offline and provide you with some of these details. Just to reiterate, we'll be putting up the video on our website, but actually what we'll also try and do is put some key questions up for some of the topics you have listed in the questions and answers, so we can give a fuller response after the meeting.
Simon, there are a couple of questions in the answered tab which I think may be interesting. There's one from Sophie Tissier about working with the River Chess and the Surface Against Sewage. I don't know if you've seen that.
We're certainly working closely with the River Chess organisation. That's Paul Jennings and co. I don't know too much about the other organisation you mentioned, but unless others can confirm, we'll perhaps deal with that offline. There's a question again from Peter around passing reference to the fact our long-term investments are UK focused. Not specifically. I think it would be nice to invest locally in our UK industries and economy. However, obviously, when we look at investments across the piece, we're looking for a return. So for some of those areas, we will be trying to get the best returns we can for our members' money. And ensure that every last penny goes into providing the support to the services that we cover.
Simon, it's Luke. Can I just pick? Sorry, so I just pick up briefly on that investment.
Sure, yeah.
From Peter Miller asking if we're UK focused, why aren't we looking at international markets? So our investments are currently about 20% bonds, about 30% property, that's UK property, and then the balance is, which is what, 50-odd% is UK equities. Now, there is an argument that, you know, FTSE 100 gets international exposure, which is kind of true to an extent. But I think you make a good point, Peter, because actually, if you look at those investments, they don't give you any exposure to the FANG type stocks. So you haven't got Amazon and you haven't got Apple and you haven't got all those high growth international stocks. In actual fact, if you look at world stock markets, about 65% US, and we're not arguably in the US at all. So I think you make a good point. Would I have chosen that UK focus? I'm not sure I would. But nevertheless, we are where we are. Do I want to sell them today to switch to international? I'm not sure I do. So I think at the moment anyway, but by the way, we've got about 220,000 invested. So I think we will look at changing maybe the mix, but not as an immediate action, I think is where we currently are. Hopefully that greater flavour or detail gives you more, a better understanding of where we are today.
It's interesting that we talked about a whole range of things. So the Oxford Cambridge ARC, and I believe predicted 1 million homes as part of that ARC. And yes, it is off the Chiltern Society map to some extent. So it's just north of us. But there will be obviously commuting, work and various other impacts. So I'm surprised nobody has mentioned that. We do have comments made about that. One of the things that's cropped up in the last week or so was the fact that Chiltern and South Bucks local plan has been shelved, and that then now translates into Buckinghamshire will do a plan for the whole county and take over that plan. So we had provided a number of submissions around that plan from our planning group. Heathrow and Luton, we've attended a number of meetings regarding those. It all seems to have gone quite quiet on some of those fronts. So appreciate that there may not be so many questions this time. I know in the past that there's been questions around Heathrow expansion and certainly also Luton work there. I think the concern for most people at the moment is around redevelopment and planning across the Chilterns themselves to make sure that that is managed and appropriate, and we'll continue as a society to respond to planning applications of any size across our piece. And most of our responses, if not all, should be shown on our website.
There is another question for Luke, actually, just from James Rodder asking about green investment trusts. Luke, have we considered green investment trusts?
Thanks, Dan. Yes, I answered that in Zoom, but maybe that. But I think that just comes to the general point that I think we should be revisiting the mix of what we're invested in. The timing of that is important. And I think, we should. Why wouldn't we look at ethical funds? I think we would. Actually, ethical funds have actually got a pretty good return at the moment as well. I'd be loath to go into things which people say are ethical, but we lose lots of money on. But I'm not sure that doesn't have to be the case. I think that should be part of the mix as well. I agree.
And actually, in a way, Peter, you're touching on I'm sure some of the themes that are going to come out of this afternoon's conference. And I will remind people of the conference this afternoon, but I think ethical investments will be critical. And I think as a society, we will need to review exactly what we do and how we go about it as part of the outcomes of this afternoon's discussions.
So if I just pick up on Les's point, so actually, Les, all of our funds, I think, or certainly most of them, are actually charity funds. I haven't actually had the time yet to look at what the rules are about what charities are allowed to invest in. But for example, if I was proposing we go and look at a cross-currency swap between US dollars and Swiss franc, I presume that I'm not allowed to do that. So we are in charitable investments already.
Okay, I think we've had quite a few questions about specific items. While we wait for some more questions to come in, I think what I'll do is just really talk about this afternoon's conference. It is our last slide. I don't know whether we can put that up while we get some more questions. Can you put the last slide up, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on a second.
Just while you're doing that, just wanted to say that it's always difficult once we had the success of last year's conference as part of our AGM day last year around chalk streams. And I well remember Fergal Sharkey's fantastic keynote speech. And we had some really positive and some good engagement from water companies, I think, and therein led to much of the achievements that Doug and his team have made in the year. It was quite difficult to say, well, okay, how do you follow this? What we're pleased to say is that actually when we decided to look at Chiltern's Net Carbon Zero or a Cleaner Greener campaign, that was back in about March, April. And at that stage, it was no clear guide as to whether this be a topical aspect going forward. But I'm very pleased to see that following a number of other conferences looking at the very similar agendas, that actually net carbon zero is a really key aspect that people do want to talk about. Very pleased to say that we have got Rosalind Redhead, who some will know well as who is put herself forward for Mayor of London candidate in 2021. She, interestingly enough, is campaigning for a net carbon zero for 2025, which I think by anybody's standards is a pretty tall order, and also makes a claim to be living the net carbon zero lifestyle on 1 tonne of carbon per year. And if those people who haven't participated in the World Wildlife Fund's carbon footprint calculator that has been promoted as part of this conference, then please do so. It is absolutely fascinating, and it's interesting to look at where we are in our daily lives and the impacts that's having on the planet. We also have this afternoon Councillor Steve Broadbent, who is the chair of the Buckinghamshire Council Climate Change Select Committee. And Steve will be extremely interesting to listen to as he puts forward Buckinghamshire Council's plans around net carbon zero for the future, and what they will be asking members in the county to deliver. And we were talking about our partnership with Chiltern Conservation Board. So very pleased to see Kath Daly, who is the countryside officer for the Chiltern's Conservation Chiltern's Conservation Board, who recently hosted a recent Greener Recovery event in the Chilterns, which I think went down extremely well and was very popular. Ed Gemmell, who represents Scientists Warning Europe, that's an interesting organisation. I think it's very worthwhile Googling them and to finding out a bit more. You'll hear more from Ed, I'm sure, about that whole aspect this afternoon. But over the last week, there's been a series of online lectures from electric cars to methane bombs, etc., etc. Very interesting talks, if you can catch some of those. And there are still more to come. So Ed is going to be a pretty busy chap today, I feel. John Meach, another collaboration partnership with CPRE. He's a trustee of Buckinghamshire Branch CPRE, who declare that climate emergency is the biggest threat facing our countryside and planet. So I think their views on how things are going will be absolutely key. And lastly, you've heard a bit from Dan this morning. I think he's dubbing himself as an eco-apprentice. So interested, enthusiastic, but keen to know more, I think. Is that right, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Honestly, for me, it's about finding out what the right thing is to do next that will make a difference. It's that straightforward. But anytime you try and do something, it becomes more complicated.
So I think it's going to be a fascinating conference this afternoon. So please, we will be there. If you go to our website, you can see the links to.
I'll paste the link in the chat, Simon. Carol Blockley has raised her hand, so I believe she would like to ask a question. Are you okay if I?
Yes, absolutely. Fantastic.
Thank you. Carol, you are live, but you are muted, I believe. Oh, there you go. Thanks, Carol. Please go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't wish to ask a question. I was just playing with my computer. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, no worries. No, that's okay. I feel that potentially we haven't got too many more questions. I just wonder whether any of the panelists, Luke, Dan, Tom, Michael, any last words from yourselves?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining, actually. It's a difficult format to make work, so I appreciate everybody bearing with us.
I think I'll just pass on all those thanks as well. So that's me done for once.
Well, can I just say that we are a membership organisation, and it's been absolutely fantastic to see so many people attending today's meeting. It's such a shame we can't meet face to face, but I'm sure that will change in the future. We wish you and your families all the best and stay safe and well. I'm really grateful to all the comments that have been made by many of those present. Hopefully we've answered as many questions as we've had come through. If there are any last ones, please feel free to email us, get in contact, attend this afternoon's conference. That would be fantastic. But I'm really grateful for all involved. My thanks to my fellow panelists and presenters, and to all of you and your families. Thank you very much for the work and support you give to the society going forward.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and I will close the conference. Thank you.
Thanks all.